In the dim glow of a flickering oil rig flare against the vast Texas night sky, young Tommy Hargrove stood frozen at the edge of a muddy field, his small hands clenched around the chain-link fence as he watched the massive drill bite into the earth like a hungry beast. The ground shook beneath his feet, a rumble that echoed the storm brewing in his chest, and in that moment, with the acrid smell of crude oil thick in the air, he turned to his father and uttered the words that would shatter their world forever. "Dad, why do we have to steal from the land like this?" But Tommy shouldn't have asked. Not then, not ever, because some questions unearth secrets buried deeper than any well, and in the heart of boomtown West Texas, where fortunes rose and fell with the price of a barrel, the truth could burn hotter than any explosion. If you believe in the power of kindness and second chances, hit that like button, drop a comment below sharing your thoughts, share this story with someone who needs it, and subscribe to Moments of Love for more tales that touch the soul. Tommy had always been the curious sort, the kind of boy whose wide-eyed wonder clashed with the hardened edges of the oil patch life he was born into. Growing up in the shadow of the Permian Basin, where endless horizons of scrubland stretched out like a faded promise, he spent his days trailing after his father, Harlan, a weathered landman whose job it was to charm, negotiate, and sometimes coerce ranchers into leasing their mineral rights to the big energy companies. Harlan was a legend in those parts, a man with a silver tongue and a handshake that sealed deals worth millions, but to Tommy, he was just Dad, the one who came home smelling of dust and desperation, his boots caked with the red clay that seemed to stain everything it touched. The family lived in a modest trailer on the outskirts of Midland, where the wind howled through the cracks like ghosts of failed dreams, and Tommy's mother, Elena, kept the home fires burning with quiet resilience, her hands calloused from sewing patches on worn jeans and baking pies for the church socials that kept the community tethered together. But beneath the surface of their simple life lurked a tension Tommy could feel but not name, like the low hum of a pumpjack in the distance, relentless and foreboding. It started small, his questions, innocent probes about why the rigs lit up the night like artificial suns, or why some neighbors drove shiny new trucks while others lost their farms to foreclosure. Harlan would ruffle his son's hair and chuckle, deflecting with stories of wildcatters striking it rich, but Tommy's mind was a fertile ground for doubt, and as he grew from a scrawny 8-year-old to a lanky 12-year-old, those seeds began to sprout. The real trouble brewed during the summer of '92, when the oil prices plummeted and the basin turned into a graveyard of idle rigs, skeletal frames silhouetted against the relentless sun. Jobs dried up faster than the cracked earth, and Harlan found himself scrambling for scraps, driving endless miles in his battered Ford pickup to knock on doors of desperate landowners. Tommy, out of school and eager for adventure, begged to tag along, and against Elena's worried protests, Harlan relented, seeing it as a chance to teach the boy the ropes of the family trade. They crisscrossed the backroads, from sun-baked ranches where cattle grazed on sparse grass to forgotten homesteads haunted by the echoes of better days. Harlan's negotiations were a masterclass in persuasion. He'd spin tales of prosperity, promise royalties that could send kids to college, all while his eyes scanned the horizon for the next big play. But Tommy noticed the undercurrents, the farmers' haunted stares, the way there. Voices cracked when they spoke of ancestors who'd tilled the same soil for generations, only to watch it poisoned by spills and scarred by pipelines. One sweltering afternoon, they pulled up to the McAllister spread, a sprawling acreage owned by old widow Agnes, whose husband had died in a rig accident years before. Harlan worked his magic, but Tommy, sitting in the truck with the windows down, overheard the whispers of coercion, the subtle threats of eminent domain if she didn't sign. That night, as they drove home under a canopy of stars that seemed indifferent to human strife, Tommy's question slipped out unbidden, igniting the fuse that would lead to devastation. From that moment, the cracks in their family facade widened into chasms. Harlan's face had paled under the dashboard lights, his grip tightening on the wheel until his knuckles turned white, and though he barked a sharp dismissal, the damage was done. Tommy's innocent query had pierced the veil of the landman's code, an unspoken pact among the men who roamed the basin, where loyalty to the companies trumped all, and questioning the ethics of the game was tantamount to betrayal. Word spread like wildfire through the tight-knit community of roughnecks and deal-makers, whispers that Harlan's boy was soft, that he might spill secrets to the wrong ears. Harlan's deals started falling through, old contacts went cold, and the pressure mounted like a gathering storm. At home, the arguments escalated, Elena's soft pleas for Harlan to find steadier work clashing with his defiant pride, the man insisting that this was their legacy, the only way to claw out of poverty's grip. Tommy watched it all unfold with a growing knot of guilt in his stomach, his once bright curiosity dimming into a shadow of regret. He threw himself into schoolwork and chores, trying to atone by helping Elena in the garden or fixing the leaky roof, but the boy could sense the unraveling, the way his father's laughter grew forced, his steps heavier with unspoken burdens. Nights brought no respite. Tommy lay awake listening to the distant thrum of compressors, imagining the land beneath them groaning in protest, its ancient layers fractured by greed. As autumn winds swept in, carrying the chill of impending hardship, the family's struggles intensified. Harlan took to drinking more, the bottles clinking in the trash like accusations, and Elena's eyes grew hollow, her smiles rarer than rain in the drought-stricken plains. Tommy, desperate to mend what he'd broken, began sneaking out to the old rig sites, scavenging for scrap metal to sell, his small frame dodging the hazards of rusted machinery and slick pits. It was on one such excursion that he stumbled upon the truth, a forgotten ledger in an abandoned trailer, its pages yellowed with age, detailing shady deals where landmen like his father had forged signatures, undervalued properties, and turned a blind eye to environmental ruin that poisoned wells and sickened livestock. The entries painted a picture of systemic corruption, a web of complicity that ensnared good men like Harlan, trapping them in a cycle of moral compromise for the sake of survival. Horrified yet compelled, Tommy hid the ledger under his mattress, its weight a constant reminder of his father's duality, the hero who provided for them, versus the enabler of destruction. The boy's internal conflict raged like a wild well fire. He loved his dad fiercely, remembered the piggyback rides through sunflower fields and the bedtime stories of frontier pioneers, but the knowledge gnawed at him, eroding the pedestal he'd built. School became a refuge, where teachers praised his sharp mind and encouraged dreams beyond the basin, but home pulled him back into the vortex, where bills piled up and the repo man circled like a vulture. Winter descended with brutal force, blanketing the landscape in a deceptive calm that belied the turmoil beneath. Harlan's desperation peaked when a major company offered a high-stakes deal on a contested plot, one riddled with environmental red flags that could devastate the local aquifer. He confided in Tommy one frostbitten evening, his breath fogging the air as they sat on the porch, admitting the moral quandary but insisting there was no choice. The money could save their home, fund Tommy's future. The boy, burdened by his secret discovery, wrestled with silence, his heart torn between loyalty and righteousness. Days blurred into a haze of tension, with Elena falling ill from the stress, her coughs echoing through the thin walls like omens. Tommy's grades slipped, his friends distanced themselves from the troublemaker's kid, and isolation wrapped around him like barbed wire. In a pivotal moment of vulnerability, as snow dusted the rigs like powdered sugar on rusted iron, Tommy confronted his father again, not with accusation but with tear-streaked pleas, begging him to walk away from the deal. Harlan's reaction was a storm of anger and anguish, his voice thundering about sacrifice and survival, but beneath it lay a flicker of doubt, planted by his son's unwavering gaze. That night, as the family huddled by the heater, something shifted. Harlan stared at the contract papers, his hand hovering over the pen, the weight of generations pressing down. Change came slowly, like the first green shoots after a long drought, but it began with Harlan's quiet decision to back out of the deal, facing backlash from his peers but earning a measure of peace in Elena's grateful embrace. The repercussions were swift. Lost income forced them to downsize, moving to a smaller apartment in town, where Harlan took a job as a mechanic, his hands now greased with honest oil rather than the slick residue of deceit. Tommy, inspired by the shift, dove into activism at school, joining environmental clubs and speaking out about the basin's hidden costs, his voice gaining strength from the scars of his family's ordeal. Elena's health improved with the reduced stress, her laughter returning like a melody long forgotten, and family dinners became sanctuaries of open conversation, where questions were welcomed rather than feared. Yet the path wasn't without setbacks. Harlan grappled with resentment from old colleagues, whispers of "traitor" following him like shadows, and Tommy faced bullying from kids whose families thrived on the very system he'd questioned. Through it all, the boy grew, his empathy deepening into a wellspring of compassion, understanding that true strength lay not in domination of the land but in harmony with it. Years passed in this gradual redemption, with Harlan mentoring young landmen on ethical practices, Elena volunteering at community centers, and Tommy pursuing studies in sustainable energy, dreaming of a future where the basin could heal. By the time Tommy stood at the cusp of adulthood, the family had forged a new legacy, one built on resilience and renewal. The old ledger, once a symbol of shame, became a catalyst for change when Tommy anonymously shared its contents with investigators, sparking reforms that protected vulnerable landowners and curbed rampant exploitation. Harlan, graying but unbowed, looked at his son with pride during a quiet sunset vigil at the site of their old trailer, the horizon now dotted with wind turbines instead of flaring rigs, a testament to progress. Elena, her hand in Harlan's, whispered of second chances, her eyes shining with the light of hard-won hope. Tommy realized then that his fateful question, though it had unleashed chaos, had also illuminated the path to redemption. Proving that even in the harshest landscapes, seeds of kindness could take root and flourish. The basin, once a battleground of greed, began to whisper stories of healing, and in that transformation, Tommy found not just forgiveness for his curiosity, but gratitude for the courage it demanded. If this story has touched your heart in any way, please like, comment, and subscribe. It means the world to us at Moments of Love to know we're connecting through these emotional journeys. Before we wrap up, I'd love for you to comment your favorite line from the story below. It could inspire our next tale.